There is a photograph taken in 1955. A woman in a summer dress stands on the steps of a building so large that the camera cannot capture all of it in a single frame. She is smiling. Behind her, the windows of the building are intact. The stonework is clean. The grounds are manicured. She is the last member of one of the wealthiest families in American history. She is also the last person who will ever smile on those steps. 3 years after that photograph was taken, the building behind her was demolished. Not because it had to be. Not because it was structurally unsound. Not because the land was needed for something else. It was demolished because the family that owned it could not afford to heat it. The family that had built it spent $90 million on its construction. The family that demolished it could not pay the fuel bill. The name on the building was Vanderbilt. And what happened to this specific mansion, Florham, in Florham Park, New Jersey, is one of the most precise and devastating illustrations of what happened to the American aristocracy between 1890 and 1960. Not through tragedy, through arithmetic. Cornelius Vanderbilt made his first fortune in ferries. He was 17 years old when he borrowed $100 from his mother and bought a small boat to carry passengers between Staten Island and Manhattan. He charged 18 cents per trip. He was ruthless, methodical, and completely indifferent to the comfort of his competitors. By the time he was 40, he controlled most of the ferry traffic on the Hudson River. By the time he was 50, he had moved into railroads and was in the process of assembling the largest private railroad network in American history. By the time he died in 1877, he was worth $105 million, the equivalent of approximately $2.3 billion today. He left almost all of it to his son William Henry. William Henry doubled it. William Henry died in 1885 and left the fortune to his 8 children. That division is where the story of the Vanderbilt mansions begins. And it is where the story of their destruction begins as well. Hamilton McKim Twombly married Florence Adele Vanderbilt in 1877. Florence was the daughter of William Henry Vanderbilt. She was one of 8 children, among whom the family fortune was divided at her father's death. Her share was approximately $10 million. Hamilton Twombly was a businessman who had worked for William Henry Vanderbilt and understood money with the precision of someone who had watched it move at very close range. He invested Florence's inheritance carefully and multiplied it. By the 1890s, the Twombleys were among the wealthiest couples in America. In 1895, they commissioned McKim Mead White, the most prestigious architectural firm in the country, to design a country estate in Madison, New Jersey. The firm was at the peak of its powers. Stanford White, the firm's most celebrated designer, had just completed several of the most admired buildings in America. He brought the same ambition to Florham. The house that McKim Mead White designed for the Twombleys was modeled on Hampton Court Palace in England. 110 rooms, 110,000 square feet, a dining room that could seat 200 guests, a stable complex large enough for 50 horses, gardens designed by the same firm that had worked on Central Park. The cost was $90 million in today's currency. Construction was completed in 1897. Florence Vanderbilt Twombly was 38 years old when she moved in. She would live in this house for the next 60 years. The Gilded Age house party was a specific cultural institution. It was not a party in the way that word is used today. It was a multi-day event, sometimes lasting a week or more, in which dozens of guests arrived by private railroad car, were housed in designated guest wings, fed by a kitchen staff of 20 or more, entertained through a structured program of activities, and departed on a schedule arranged by the hostess. Florence Twombly was one of the great hostesses of the Gilded Age. Her guest lists at Florham read like a directory of American power in the 1890s and early 1900s. Presidents, senators, industrialists, foreign dignitaries. The food at Florham was prepared by French chefs who had been recruited from the finest restaurants in Paris. The wine cellar contained thousands of bottles selected by a dedicated sommelier. The table settings were designed by Tiffany. The flowers were grown in a greenhouse on the property, specifically so that fresh arrangements could be placed in every room every morning. The stable produced ribbons at horse shows across the Northeast. Florham was not just a house. It was a demonstration, a proof of concept for what American wealth could produce when it was applied to the project of living well. Hamilton Twombly died in 1910. Florence continued at Florham. She was the last of William Henry Vanderbilt's children still living in the manor that the family's original fortune had made possible. Her siblings were dying, their estates were being sold, the houses were being demolished. Florence watched each one go. She stayed at Florham. She was wealthy enough, careful enough, old-fashioned enough to maintain the house through the 1920s and 30s, when her contemporaries were cutting staff and closing wings. She kept the full complement of household staff. She kept the kitchen running at its original standard. She kept the gardens. She kept the horses, though fewer than before. She was doing something that had become almost impossible to do. She was maintaining the scale of the original enterprise. She did it through the Great Depression. She did it through the Second World War. She kept the lights on at Florham for 60 years. She died in 1952. She was 98 years old. Her daughter Ruth inherited the property. Ruth was 70 years old. She had no children. She had the house. She did not have the fortune that had made the house possible. The combination of estate taxes, maintenance costs, and the simple arithmetic of what it cost to heat 110,000 square feet through a New Jersey winter made the situation clear within months. Florham could not survive its owner's death. The estate taxes levied on Florham after Florence's death consumed a significant portion of what remained of the Twombly fortune. The Internal Revenue Service assessed the property at a value that bore no relationship to what it cost to maintain. It was worth millions on paper. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to run. Nobody wanted to buy it at the assessed value. Nobody wanted to run it at the operational cost. Ruth Twombly spent 3 years trying to find a solution. She explored converting it to a hotel. The conversion costs were prohibitive. She explored donating it to the state of New Jersey. The state declined. The maintenance costs were too high for a public institution. She explored subdividing the property for residential development. The zoning restrictions made it complicated. She explored selling the contents. The contents were extraordinary. Furniture, silver, paintings, objects accumulated over 60 years of serious collecting. The auction took several days. It raised significant money, but not enough to save the building. In 1955, a woman in a summer dress stood on the steps of Florham and smiled for the last photograph ever taken of the house in good condition. She was Ruth Twombly. She was 73 years old. She knew what was coming. She is smiling anyway. In 1958, Florham was demolished. The wrecking crew took several weeks. The stone was sold. The fixtures were sold. The land was sold to Fairleigh Dickinson University, which still occupies part of the original property. The stable complex, which was structurally simpler and therefore cheaper to maintain, survived. It is still standing today. The house is gone. What remained of the Florham estate became a college campus. The stable became a university building. Students park their cars where the Vanderbilt horses once stood. Classrooms occupy the space where liveried grooms once worked. The gardens that had been tended by a dedicated staff of 12 are gone. The greenhouse that produced the fresh flowers for every room every morning is gone. The kitchen where French chefs produced dinners for 200 guests is gone. The dining room where those dinners were served is gone. The library where Hamilton Twombly kept his collection of first editions is gone. The guest wings where presidents and senators slept are gone. All of it is gone. What replaced it is a regional university that serves middle-class students from New Jersey and has no particular connection to the history of the land it occupies. Which is not a criticism. It is simply what happened. A house built for one family at a cost that cannot be precisely calculated was replaced by an institution that serves thousands of students every year. The trade is not obviously wrong. It is simply absolute. There is no version of Florham that comes back. The story of Florham is not unique. It is representative of the approximately 600 Gilded Age mansions built in America between 1870 and 1910. Fewer than 200 survive. The rest were demolished, not in a single catastrophe, one by one, over 50 years, as the fortunes that built them divided among heirs, as the estate taxes consumed the capital that maintenance required, as the domestic staff that made them operable became unavailable, as the culture that had given them meaning dissolved. The American aristocracy built these houses because it believed in its own permanence. It was wrong. The houses lasted longer than the culture that built them, but not long enough. The Vanderbilt name still carries weight in American memory. The Breakers in Newport is a museum. Biltmore in Asheville is a hotel. Marble House in Newport is a museum. These are the survivors. The houses that found new purposes. The houses that the public decided were worth saving. Florham was not saved, not because it was less magnificent than the Breakers, because it was in New Jersey rather than Newport, because it did not have the same tourist infrastructure, because the family that owned it ran out of options before the preservation movement reached full strength, because the arithmetic of estate taxes and heating bills was faster than the arithmetic of public sentiment. The stable is still there. The land is still there. Students walk across the grounds that Florence Vanderbilt Twombly walked for 60 years. They do not know what was here. There is no marker. There is no plaque. There is no acknowledgement that one of the most extraordinary private residences in American history stood on this ground and was demolished in 1958 because nobody could pay the fuel bill. The cruel question at the center of Florham's story is this: the family that spent $90 million building it could not spend enough to save it. The country that celebrated the Vanderbilt fortune as evidence of American possibility demolished the evidence. Not through malice, through indifference, through the simple failure to decide before it was too late that this thing was worth more than what the land was worth without it. Florence Vanderbilt Twombly kept the lights on at Florham for 60 years because she understood what she had. When she died, the understanding died with her. The lights went out 6 years later. The stable is still there. Students park their cars in it. The house is not there. It has not been there since 1958. Nobody marked the occasion. Did you know about Florham before today? Tell me in the comments what you think should have been done differently.